Hello everyone! Thanks for coming by to hear what else I saw in January. This month's collection has a higher number of newer movies than usual, and if you take a gander at the description, you'll notice some streaming services there that I never mention. I had brief access to these apps through my brother, and while ultimately there wasn't much on any of them that I was interested in, and I came away with renewed confidence that I don't need those in my life. I did take the opportunity to see a couple new releases I had been curious about. Like movie number 1, M. Night Shyamalan's latest thriller, 2024's Trap. Josh Hartnett stars as a doting father escorting his daughter to a huge pop star's concert. He notices the place is crawling with police and learns they're hunting a high-profile serial killer known as the Butcher. Can I say more than that? The trailer gave it away, and even if you didn't see the trailer, it's pretty obvious from about 15 to 20 minutes in. I think this had the potential to be good, but it was never more than just okay. It's cluttered, with way too much time spent on the bland concert performance. This makes much more sense when you realize the pop star is Shyamalan's own daughter. She wrote and performed all 14 songs. That's a lot of songs. So this is kind of a proud parent's vanity project. Even so, I think one of the better twists comes in the second half when she steps out of the periphery and gets involved in the plot. I at least appreciated the character's initiative. I heard other people criticize her acting, and yeah, she's not great, but she's not atrocious either compared to what I expected, and I would counter that even talented and experienced thespians struggle when confronted with Shyamalan's most awkward dialogue. There are some really wonky lines in this, and he often has the actors stare straight into the camera, which does not help. Josh Hartnett's performance is interesting. It's kind of humorous, but also hokey, hammy, bizarre. It was definitely intentional, and it sort of worked, but there were some scenes where I thought, ooh, I wonder what the other takes were like. Veteran star Hayley Mills is wasted on a character that's poorly built up and integrated. Alison Pill has a short amount of screen time as well, but she does make the most of it. And I guess the girl playing the daughter was fine. The movie also seemed super long. There were 3 or 4 times when I thought it was wrapping up, and then it kept going and going and going. So I wasn't too impressed. I didn't abhor it the way some people did. I would say it was better than Old. I hated Old. Maybe I felt this way because I had already adjusted my expectations and there wasn't anything tremendously stupid to the point that it was insulting here. There wasn't anything repulsive about the movie, but it wasn't too good either, and there were many things about it that were weird, forced, and completely unbelievable. Movie number 2 is 2024's Twisters. A group of storm chasers and researchers gets caught in a major tornado outbreak in Oklahoma. This quasi-sequel to the 1996 hit Twister stars Daisy Edgar-Jones and Glenn Powell. Again, I went in with low expectations. I approach most new movies with low expectations, but this time I was more impressed. Or, not impressed, I was more satisfied. Twisters has a few references to the original film and a bit of repetition, but it doesn't rely too heavily on callbacks and tells its own story rather than being a beat-for-beat rewrite. I thought Daisy Edgar-Jones was really good, delivering an emotional performance that brought depth to what could have been a basic role in a basic summer blockbuster. Glenn Powell was a charmer, as usual. I guess I still like him, even though he's lost some of his appeal for me. He got too popular, and then that whole anyone but you thing made me lose some respect for him, but he's still attractive, and we've got the motley crew of tornado chasers, though none of them is as wacky as Philip Seymour Hoffman was, and none of them spouts lines as memorably strange. I thought the effects were pretty good. They didn't match the visuals from the original film for me. There's something about those tornado designs, the sequences in Twister that made a strong impression on me as a kid, and these weren't quite as impactful, but it was still pretty good. We got twins, a fire tornado, some cool shelf clouds, etc., and it was a quality production. I am familiar with some of the lingo, and not just from seeing Twister many, many times. Over the last 18 months, or maybe it's been 2 years now, my mom's been following a couple severe weather YouTubers, Ryan Hall and Max Velocity, and we have tuned into a lot of live tornado outbreak coverage. And these live streams often, almost always, include feeds from chasers in the field, providing close-up views. So I've kind of gotten to know what real storm chasers are like. Therefore, I was able to tell that Powell's character is basically a riff on Reed Timmer, who's the current rock star of storm chasing social media. Regarding the community as a whole, though, I don't think this is the most accurate depiction, just because from what I've seen, they're more likely to partner up and work together than to try to undermine each other. Although, people are people, I'm sure there is some of that. I appreciated how the film showed the chasers' efforts to warn residents and to help in the aftermath. I've learned that storm chasers are often the first to arrive at a site of devastation even before emergency responders. Occasionally, they end up saving lives. So it was nice to see that side beyond the wackiness and the competition. Overall, Twisters was an entertaining movie. It had good drama, a couple funny bits, a nice little romance, they should have kissed, good action, exciting storm sequences. To me, it was one of the better weather movies of the last couple decades. Movie number 3 is a rewatch, 1939's Stagecoach. With the threat of an Apache attack hanging over them, an unusual band of traveling companions barrel toward their destination, but unforeseen delays place them in greater danger. I think very highly of this movie, so when I found out that my dad had somehow never seen it, I was shocked and said, "We've got to do something about this." I had a hunch that the Criterion Channel might have it, and they did, so we watched it immediately. It's one of the best westerns ever made, an energetic John Ford classic with some beautiful scenes and a solid story full of well-drawn and interesting characters. It boasts a stellar ensemble cast. Claire Trevor is great, Thomas Mitchell is great. I think when I found myself watching this the first time years ago, back when I thought I didn't like westerns, it was on a day of Thomas Mitchell films. This was followed by Only Angels Have Wings, also 1939, which has another great performance of his. 1939, one of the best years for movies, also a very busy and superlative year for Thomas Mitchell. There was Stagecoach, Only Angels Have Wings, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Gone with the Wind. Is there a 5th movie he was in that I've forgotten? I think it's just those 4, but wow, what a year. Of course, who can forget this is the movie that made John Wayne a star, and I dare say he never looked better. And John Carradine gives a noteworthy performance, playing a svelte southern gentleman gambler, and I've always wondered why he didn't get more parts like this, instead of being relegated to creepy side characters and villains. I have an affinity for the odd mix of characters stuck together in a deadly situation subgenre. This is an early entry and still one of the best. It's got a thrilling action sequence with some fantastic stunts that are as impressive now as they were 80 plus years ago, and it's just a great film all around. Movie number 4 is, I believe, only on Netflix. I've had it on a recommendations list, waiting years for me to have the opportunity to watch it, so when I had access to Netflix, I was like, oh good, now I can watch this movie. It's 2022's Against the Ice, a turn-of-the-century survival film based on a true story. Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who also co-produced and co-wrote the screenplay, stars as a Danish captain determined to find the remains of a polar expedition that disappeared in Greenland. It's a good film. The main character is undergoing a grueling test of endurance and sanity against a frigid, forbidding, but beautiful landscape. It's an odd partnership, the austere, duty-driven captain and a mechanic, played by Joe Cole, who volunteers to join him despite a total lack of experience, and they're forced to rely on each other in ways they never expected. The story takes a turn, and then another turn, and then another turn, and I was glad that I went in with no idea where we were going or what the outcome would be. Those turns were much more effective because I was in the dark. It's got a couple scenes that made me feel queasy, as any decent survival movie does, and if you can't stand films where bad things happen to dogs, you would probably hate this. But a couple sketchy effects with a polar bear notwithstanding, I thought it was fine, well acted and well told. Movie number 5 is 2024's Carry On. I guess this was Netflix's non-romantic Christmas movie offering. A thriller starring Taron Egerton as a TSA agent forced by Jason Bateman's bad guy to ensure a certain suitcase clears security at LAX. If he doesn't comply, his pregnant girlfriend will be killed. I had heard mixed, mostly bad, things about this online, and it wasn't horrible, but it was tedious, and it did rely on a lot of dumb, unrealistic things, a lot of conveniences, and it made people on just about every level of authority seem alarmingly irresponsible or inept. There were also a few awfully goofy parts, some intentional, some, I guess, not. I will say, though, that Bateman's dry sense of humor at least was a more interesting element, even if the tone ended up all over the place. A 2-hour runtime was way too long, and some of it was just absurd, but there were a few times when I was moderately diverted. And that's it for Netflix. And apparently after that, I was like, I don't want to watch any more new movies. I just bring back the old stuff. So the rest of these movies are all pre-1970. Movie number 6 is 1953's Cry of the Hunted. When a high-profile prisoner escapes, the cop who's been fostering a bond with him is sent to track him down, following him into the Louisiana bayou. This was good. It's kind of like The Fugitive crossed with 1941's Swamp Water, starring Dana Andrews and Walter Brennan, Walter Houston, and Ann Baxter. That is an obscure reference, I know, but I reviewed it last year, so it's kind of fresh on my mind, and a few of you will remember it. Barry Sullivan gets second billing, but in my opinion, he's the real star. He tosses out quips and wisecracks and has great chemistry with the rest of the cast. William Conrad plays his professional rival, while Polly Bergen plays his wife. She's oddly dubbed, I don't know what was up with that, but it didn't detract too much. They have an amusingly flirtatious relationship, and since there's not a whole lot to the plot, all these interactions kept the film engaging. I confess I was underwhelmed by Vittorio Gassman's lead performance. Not that he was bad, I just wasn't feeling it. His con is obsessed with getting back to his wife, played by Mary Xavier, afraid that she's left him while he's been in jail. When we finally get to meet this woman, whew! I thought she was scary. His tentative friendship with Sullivan felt genuine, though, and while the film has a comically speedy wrap-up, it's entertaining overall. You've just got to get a feel for its sense of humor, and don't be put off by the random dream sequence. Movie number 7 is a Japanese film, 1947's Snow Trail. A trio of bank robbers hides out on a remote Japanese mountaintop, accessible only to expert skiers via one perilous road. When they encounter a kindly group running an old inn, the thieves find themselves at odds about their next steps. I had assumed this was an Akira Kurosawa movie, but it was actually directed by Senkichi Taniguchi. But Kurosawa wrote the screenplay, and it definitely feels like Kurosawa. Toshiro Mifune makes his simmering big-screen debut alongside Takashi Shimura, the first of many times they would appear together on screen. Mifune, playing a wolfish, dangerously high-strung character, is as magnetic as ever, but later it becomes Shimura's vehicle, as his criminal leader contemplates his actions. The gripping first half is driven by plot, while the second half is driven by character, taking a surprisingly compelling turn. The film has a couple slow spots and lacks some of the visual interest it might have had if it had been directed by Kurosawa, but it's far from mediocre, a good film with a good story. Movie number 8 is a rewatch, 1962's Experiment in Terror. Lee Remick stars as a bank teller targeted by a man who threatens to harm her and her kid sister if she doesn't comply with his plans to rob her bank. Glenn Ford plays an FBI agent striving to protect her and find the guy before it's too late. You'll find this on a lot of those could have been a Hitchcock movie, or watch this if you love Hitchcock lists. I know I would put it on mine, but it was directed by Blake Edwards, who crafts an unnerving and exciting thriller. There are several chilling sequences, one an uncomfortably prolonged opening scene where the creep makes contact with his prey, another a sequence in a woman's fantastically eerie apartment. The film's got some clever editing, a Henry Mancini score, a San Francisco setting that takes us both downtown and to the suburbs, and a tense climax. It's a mature film, but since it's 1962, it had to be mature in a creative way, pushing the envelope so subtly that it's often up to the viewer to take notice and fill in the blanks, and the dark overtones add just one more disturbing layer. Remick's heroine is wide-eyed with fear, but not stupid, while Ford's G-Man provides the reassurance and stability that you would hope to get from the authorities in a situation like this. Unfortunately, that's not always what you find. They're both great, not to mention you get an excellent performance from Ross Martin. While this isn't a movie I would want to revisit again and again, I have wanted to rewatch it for a while, and it was just as good as I remembered, and I think there are a couple things I caught that I didn't pick up on when I saw it 10 or 15 years ago. Movie number 9 is 1941's Cottage to Let, a light wartime thriller in which the Scottish home of an inventor working on a top-secret bomb site becomes crowded with questionable employees and guests. I didn't think I'd seen this, but there were a couple shots that seemed a little familiar, so even though afterward I would have said, nope, never seen that before, I did check my records, and it turns out we watched it in 2015. I enjoyed this movie a lot. Like it was the first time. It's a fun espionage thriller that keeps you guessing just who the real spies are. While I wouldn't call it a full-blown comedy, it is humorous, and the characters are delightful. The cast is a treat, featuring teenaged George Cole as a smart aleck evacuee from the Blitz, Leslie Banks as the affable scientist, Jean de Casalis as his wife who scrambles her words, Michael Wilding as the klutzy, bespectacled assistant, Alistair Sim as a nosy tenant, and John Mills as a down flyer recovering from his injuries. All give good performances, though Mills, Sir John Mills, has one scene that is so spectacularly overacted that I think it must have been intentional. It must have been. While the plot isn't especially deep or intricate, there's plenty of hustle and bustle, and these vibrant personalities make it a hoot. I absolutely enjoyed it. Movie number 10 is 1934's Tomorrow's Children, an anti-eugenics film in which a hard-working, soon-to-be-married young woman from a poor family of degenerate and disabled offspring is unwillingly scheduled for sterilization. This is a very interesting and controversial film. It was controversial then, and it would be controversial now if anybody knew that it existed. It's rather crudely made, with stark, simple sets, no big stars, and a runtime that doesn't pass the hour mark, and if they'd cut Sterling Holloway's unnecessary comic relief, it would have been even shorter. It packs a punch, though, tackling a subject I personally have strong convictions about. In a way, it's like a horror film, one made to counter the eugenics movement, ardently promoted by the likes of Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood and birth control activist. Critics of the film will call it propaganda, and I'll concede it does have broad characterizations and some didactic dialogue, and clearly presentation of the message supersedes any desire for polished storytelling. But I think it deserves credit for taking a staunch position at a time when eugenics was very popular. Mandatory sterilization was on the books in many US states. It may garner ridicule from some, but in my view, the film paints a disturbing picture that makes me say, gee, things haven't changed much in 90 years. Unfortunately, its rough quality hampers its effectiveness, and they kind of fumbled the ball with a convenient twist. But I appreciate the film for what it does say, and its gutsiness in saying it. And movie number 11 is 1941's West Point Widow. Anne Shirley plays a hospital nurse who conceals the fact she's a single mother from the rest of the staff. When her persistent admirer, Richard Carlson, discovers she has a baby, he gets pulled into her complicated situation. This one had kind of an annoying start, but I like the lead actors, and as the story advanced, it redeemed itself. Its premise is remarkable for the time, as is the way characters repeatedly did not respond the way I expected, which was a good thing. The other man is played by a very young Richard Denning, who makes a brief appearance. This was 13 years before he played Carlson's rival in The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I was looking forward to a pre-match, but they barely share the screen. It is one of those romances that relies on poor or non-existent communication to generate conflict, which is frustrating, and I realized after that the title is dumb, but once it got going, I liked it better. It has several fun and amusing moments, including Carlson getting stuck in a high chair and donning a Santa suit. It's a short but sweet film. The beginning's a little rough, but I came around to it. And that's what else I saw in January. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of any of these movies down in the comments below. You can find the titles and where I watched them listed in the description, and I'll see you next weekend. Thanks for watching.